here are the risks in your organization. This is how we want to remediate them. But if ever there's a compromise or an incident, this is the plan that we follow. I think giving them that comfort goes a long way with them looking at you as a leader who's going to protect their environment.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative, in conjunction with Cyber Reason, is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Sam Monasteri, Vice President of Global Cybersecurity at ACCO Brands. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Todd. Pleasure to be here this morning. Looking forward to our conversation.
And it's great to have you here. And I know ACCO Brands has so many household names. I know I grew up with Swingline when I was a kid as the staplers, right?
Yeah, the world famous red stapler. In an office space. That's a very popular product.
Oh, well known. So how did you get into security?
I started in security in the late 90s. I was working for a very well-known HVAC company today at the Sears Tower, where we had a front-end system that controlled a lot of the physical security for the building, the HVAC, the lights, etc. But one of the main pieces of that whole solution was a security piece that I was responsible for. It sort of struck a passion with me. It lit a fire. I really learned to like IT, specifically security. And from there, I made a decision to look for a straight security job, straight IT job, and ended up getting hiring by KPMG in the late 90s. I was in charge of special projects, security projects, etc. While at KPMG, I then transitioned into more of a consulting role, performing pen tests, performing enterprise security assessments, vendor security assessments, etc. And that really catapulted me into the industry, gave me a good foundation, and really built my passion. And I knew this is the route I wanted to go with my career.
That sounds like a great background. I mean, who would have thought that the HVAC vendors that we've been focusing on them with security, but we all know the breach that happened a few years ago with the Target breach, and how important those vendor relationships are.
Yeah, one thing that really opened my eyes is when I was with TransUnion is they have a very large vendor third-party relationship, obviously, because they're considered a credit bureau, and their vendor management or security vendor process and program was very ahead of the times at that time, and I learned a lot of the requirements in regards to assessing a vendor's security footprint, along with understanding how an organization can enforce their policies with their vendors, and then also reviewing the contracts and the NDAs to ensure that the organization is protected as well.
It sounds like great experience, along with the pen testing experience, where you really get to see how attackers are attacking our networks. And you wrote a great piece for the CISO Compass book, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. And your piece was called Security from Scratch, Incident Response on a Shoestring Budget. And I just love the title, because who doesn't have to deal with incident response, and who doesn't have a shoestring budget these days?
Right.
We could all use more money, right? So why don't you walk us through a little bit of that, of what you wrote in that piece?
Yeah. A lot of the piece really came from just experience I've had in the past. As you can guess, getting into security in the late '90s to early 2000s, security wasn't even called really security at that time. It was more IT controls. SOX came about, and then we moved into a little bit more of general IT controls. And in about the mid 2000s, that's really when information security really took off. Compliance and regulatory requirements took off as well, related to IT. But I think a constant throughout my career is that it's always been very difficult for information security or cybersecurity to really make that impact on the board, to really get that budget that's required. And I think for most organizations, experts say it should be anywhere between 4 and 6% of the IT budget. And in most cases, I believe most CISOs will say they're below that today. Okay, other than a lot of very large high-risk organizations who are probably spending an exceptional amount of money on cyber, but also organizations that have very large breaches in the past have invested highly as well, such as Target and other organizations. So when I sort of wrote this, I sort of want to take that a little bit into consideration. But one thing that really I wanted to resonate with the audience was a couple bullets, really 4 or 5 items that I felt were very important, so that if somebody getting into a CISO position or a management position in security, that they can go through this list and say, okay, this is a good straw man framework to build an incident program, but without having a very large budget. It's about really rolling up your sleeves, creating policies, procedures, playbooks, and building relationships with your business internally.
And so how do you get that board buy-in for your program? Did you have any techniques that you would use to, help that aha moment, the light bulb go on in their minds?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to do that. Okay, and one of the ways that I really like to do it is early on. If you're moving into a position as a CISO and a manager, and you sort of walk in and you really want to build up and enhance the security posture for the organization, it's really important to perform a baseline risk assessment of the organization. Try to really get a better idea of the risks that are out there today that are impacting the business. And, you have to focus on impacting the business when you communicate to the business. Bottom line, how's it going to affect revenue if the organization becomes compromised? Or if you're a heavy organization using e-commerce sites and credit cards become fall into the hands of bad guys, and if PCI comes after you, you have a real risk of your business being shut down or being held to paying heavy fines as a result. So when I speak to the business, I think the first bullet that I've written inside the CISO Compass book was get executive level buy-in. Okay, and it's key. It's key to sit down with each business unit leader, be it a president or a vice president, and really explain to them what the risks are to their organizations. And if we don't take care of these risks, this is the business impact. X, compromise could result in high fines. Y, reputation damage, and Z, really hit the revenue. Bottom line could be impacted greatly. And I think if you build those relationships and you also explain to them risk and business impact at a level that they understand it, I think they will be more understanding at sitting down at those board meetings and saying, we really need to invest in cybersecurity or information security in order to protect our brand and be successful. That's been always the way how I've approached it in the past.
Sure. Sure. And what I really liked, one of the ways to do that you mentioned in your piece was this establishing this multidisciplinary team of incident responders, and not just looking at IT.
Right. IT, those are the folks, IT and information security, those are the folks that are going to be boots on the ground, remediating the issue. They're going to be the lever pullers. But what's really important is that at the management and at the executive levels, that you form relationships with human resources, legal, supply chain, finance, and media relations. So, for example, at Echo Brands, we have almost like an executive incident response team that includes myself, part of cybersecurity, but we also have legal and privacy and corporate risk management as well. We are the decision makers, we are the reviewers, and we are the assessors of impact to the organization. And then we pull in human resources, supply chain, and finance as needed. And if ever, we actually have been working with the media relations team or the public relations team at ACO to make sure they have a playbook in place if we have a major compromise or breach that needs to be communicated.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, available at Amazon.com and other booksellers. Do you start somewhere? Is there a certain business unit that you found that you spend more time with, or that you start there and you bring the other business units in?
Yeah, legal and privacy is the consistent business unit that we work with from an incident response standpoint. We brought corporate risk management in because it made sense. But those are really the two that we work with very closely. In HR, depending on the organization, HR could be very close to cybersecurity as well, especially if they rely on cyber to perform any type of employee investigations or something like that from a technical standpoint. From my experience at Echo Brands, it's mainly legal, privacy, and risk management today.
Did you find that you had to be the one to initiate that as a CISO, or were they coming to you saying, "Hey, we've heard these things in the news. This is a concern to us," or we should have something around incident response, or was it a combination of both?
It was a little bit of a combination of both. Okay, I think our executive leaders at ACO understood that there was a need for the three organizations to really keep in lockstep with each other. Coming in as a new CISO 3 years ago at ACO, of course, it's good practice to reach out, explain to the stakeholding groups what your plan is, what your process is, and really where you want to go over the next 1 to 3 and then 3 to 5 years. So pulling those cross-functional groups in was not too large of a task. However, in some organization, it can be, especially an organization that is fairly new to information security and trying to grow that culture and maturity.
Sure. So you mentioned the 3 Ps in there. I love that acronym. A nice, easy way to think of it. Why don't you tell us about the 3 Ps?
Sure. The 3 Ps are something I've used for a really long time. It may not work in the methodology for every organization, but anybody can use it to build really a high-level incident response plan and program. It's plot, plan, and practice. The first thing, as an incident responder or as a leader, you want to plot your incident response plan. You want to create it. You want to make sure all the phases are part of that plan. You want to document it. You also want it to be reviewed by legal as well. It's key that incident response plan is reviewed because they they understand the type of verbiage in that plan, in that program, that will result in ensuring people are accountable for their roles within the organization. And once that has been basically developed, it's time to communicate again to the stakeholders and the individuals making up the incident response team. The individuals making up the response team, should be well versed in the program and the plan, along with any other playbooks that may be created later on. The stakeholders should be aware of it too, and I believe a very good example of the stakeholders are any type of executive leadership that you spoke to, anybody that you've spoken to about here are the risks in your organization. This is how we want to remediate them. But if ever there's a compromise or an incident, this is the plan that we follow. I think giving them that comfort goes a long way with them looking at you as a leader who's going to protect their environment. The second P is plan for possible threat scenarios. And, one of the key pieces of any program, and it's gained a lot of steam over the last 5 to 10 years, is creating playbooks for incidents that occur, on a more likely basis than other incidents, right? So I believe we have anywhere between 8 and 10 playbooks today in our environment. We have anywhere from a malware incident playbook to a data privacy incident playbook. And as basic as what do you do when somebody calls and says they've lost or their laptop has been stolen. So we have playbooks for all of that, so that if cybersecurity is not around, and if our IT support desk needs to understand, okay, what do I do? This person has just called me and said that the back of their window has been smashed and their PC has been stolen. What is the first step do I need the user to do, right? So that's really what we look at when we say define playbooks.
So you define playbooks for those items that are more likely
yes.
to occur.
Yes, exactly. There's no reason why that information should not be available to anybody who's going to be either part of the incident response team or answering the phone from a perspective from a user who may be frantic that they've essentially been phished, their PC has been stolen, or if they believe their device has malware on it.
So what sort of things do you put in that playbook?
Yeah. So, for instance, let's talk about phishing. Okay, if somebody believes that they've been phished, a couple of the things that we immediately have the person do is, obviously change your password. Right. That's something that we need to do. So we have steps on the first 3 critical pieces from like a phishing perspective for service desk to follow up on. Right. Change the password, unplug the PC, run a virus scan on it. Right. And then cybersecurity is notified in parallel, and then we start looking at more deeper things like has their email rules been changed or something like that? Has the person who has the bad guy started using this particular email account? Are they starting to send emails via an Aquabrand's email account? So we have some very low-level steps for our service desk, and then we also have some very detailed steps that if we have a newcomer in cybersecurity, they can fall back on this playbook if they're handling something.
Excellent.
And the last P is practice your action plan, right? And I think a lot of people have been doing this for years for DR and BCP. But one of the things that I really like to do is try to fit in 2 tabletop exercises a year. And one is typically with what we'll call the boots on the ground folks, the pure IT folks who are fixing the problem or remediating the problem and trying to segment it. And the other tabletop is typically with our board. We have our insurance provider, our information security insurance provider, come in and they basically create a tabletop scenario for us. And they have it be a very interactive conversation on how business units, HR, legal, media relations, and supply chain would react if these events occurred. For instance, if the organization went through a major ransomware infection, right? What would we do from a manufacturing standpoint? What would we do from a pure shipping standpoint for our ERP systems? So it's those type of conversations, and I think not only does that get people more involved and understand the criticality of some of these decisions that they would never know of before until it really happened in real life, but they also can understand the impact and the timing it would take to get business back to normal if the right investment isn't in place to have the right controls, processes, and procedures in place to protect the organization.
That sounds very visible, and I'm sure that helps with going back to step one of getting that executive buy-in in the future, that they understand and see the importance of the role of cybersecurity as well.
Yeah, it all ties in together, right? It's about relationship building internally, but it's also about proving that cybersecurity is protecting the organization, and then making ensuring your executives are comfortable with the approach. One thing that I like to do is I like to balance risk and productivity, right? It's very important to ensure that your leadership knows that you're protecting the organization, but you also don't want to tie the business's hands from doing their work properly, right? Security can be an inconvenience, but at some level, that inconvenience is protecting the organization, and it's part of my job to sort of balance that as well.
Excellent point. Anything else you'd like to share that we haven't covered today about incident response that would be important?
I think just lastly, when I talk about building relationships, it's just not internally, it's externally as well. It's key to have some outside contacts for law enforcement, in your Rolodex or in your contacts, wherever you store your contact information, to have somebody that you can call immediately if you feel like a major compromise has occurred. For us, we have an FBI contact, and we also have a straight line to our insurance provider who will get us in contact with individuals if we are experiencing something critical, or if we need to actually just say, hey, we believe this is a risk at this level, but we'd like you to take a look at this. Have we done everything correctly? Do you agree with our approach? And are we assessing the risk properly as well? So building those outside relationships are just as key as building the inside relationship in order to build this incident response program to be successful.
Very smart advice. Last time that you want to be contacting outside services is when you're in the middle of an incident, right?
Exactly. And you don't want to be surprised by it. You don't want someone knocking on your door. You want to be knocking on somebody else's door for assistance.
Great advice. Well, thanks a lot, Sam, and thanks for your contribution to the CISO Compass book and for sharing this information with the broader CISO community. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Todd. It's been a pleasure and great time speaking with you.
Thank you.
Cybereason is the champion for today's defenders, providing an endpoint security platform to prevent, detect, and respond to malicious operations on computers, mobile devices, servers, and the cloud. Cybereason. End cyber attacks from endpoints to the enterprise to everywhere. Learn more at cybereason.com/CISO stories.